Please bring Jim a warm welcome as he steps up. Thank you, Jim. And welcome.
Thanks, President Deb. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here. Before I get started, as Minister responsible, as Deb said, I'm also Minister responsible for First Nation, Métis, and Northern Affairs. I also want to acknowledge the people of La Loche during this very difficult time. You heard the Premier speak about it yesterday. The shock and sadness that we all felt upon hearing about the tragedy is going to linger for a long time. And our thoughts continue to be with the family and friends of the victims and indeed for the entire La Loche community. La Loche has the support of our entire province. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I get started, first of all, I'd like to introduce, I have some colleagues in the crowd today. Not sure where they're all sitting. I see my colleague Kevin Phillips. Kevin is the MLA for Melfort, the former mayor of Melfort, so he's well known in this crowd, and is also Legislative Secretary for Regional and Municipal Cooperation. Kevin, thanks for being here. Somewhere, I know the Honourable Herb Cox, MLA from the Battlefords and Minister of the Environment is here. Herb's back there. Thanks, Herb. And I believe the Honourable Scott Moe, MLA for Rosthern Shellbrook and Minister of Advanced Education is here. Scott? Is he late again? Because he was actually late last year, and I mentioned he was late when he walked in, so that could happen again this year. We also have Trent Weatherspoon. Trent's the MLA for Regina Rosemont, and I believe Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Trent's at the back there. Trent? Trent's also a municipal affairs critic and has never once asked me a question about municipal revenue sharing, just saying. So a lot has happened since I spoke to you last February at your annual conference. There was a small cabinet shuffle in May. That was precipitated by our longtime deputy. Here's the late Scott Moe, ladies and gentlemen. We were just talking about you earlier, buddy. It's not true. He's making like he was in a meeting or something. So that minor shuffle was precipitated by the announcement by our longtime Deputy Premier and Finance Minister, the Honourable Ken Kravets, that he wouldn't be seeking re-election. And so Kevin Doherty was appointed Finance Minister, and that caused a small cabinet shuffle. Now, I was thrilled to keep all the responsibilities that I had prior. As Minister of Government Relations, as Deb said, I'm also Minister responsible for First Nation, Métis, and Northern Affairs, and I'm Minister responsible for Sask Energy. And with the additional duties, I was appointed Minister responsible for SaskTel. I was sworn in as Minister of SaskTel on a Thursday. On Friday, the files were all moved to my office, and on Monday, the internet went down. You could text, but you couldn't get email, you couldn't go online. So this was going on all day, and my office was keeping me updated by text as to how SaskTel was doing, trying to repair the problem. And late that afternoon, I got a text message from a friend of mine, and it said, "You were just appointed Minister of SaskTel, and you broke the internet." Before I could even decide what my response should be, I got another text from my Chief of Staff that said, "It's repaired and everything's going back online." So I texted my friend back and said, "You should have let me know sooner." I fixed it. So this has been a challenging year financially for the province. The Premier went into some detail about the state of the province's finances yesterday, so I'm not going to repeat that. But just briefly, I now serve as Vice Chair of Treasury Board, and I can tell you that the drop in the price of oil in the past year has had a huge effect on the province's finances. We were also impacted, of course, by the costs of fighting an unprecedented number of forest fires in the north last summer. But our economy is more diversified than it's ever been in the past, and that allows us to weather a downturn better than we could have just a few short years ago. So that in turn allows us to cope better than most other jurisdictions would do during times of extreme turmoil like this. Take Alberta, for example. A $6 billion deficit this year in spite of increased taxes. The price of oil has had a huge impact on their provincial treasury. And while we're certainly not immune to worldwide problems, our economy is strong. We continue to have the lowest unemployment rate in the country. We continue to set records in wholesale trade. And our population, after decades of hovering around the million mark, at last count, we're at 1,134,000 people strong. So despite challenges like the price of oil, we were able to continue with some very important programs. And that's probably the most important thing I have to discuss with you today. During a tough budget year, we were still able to provide a record $265 million in revenue sharing. I have a very important chart I'd like to share with you. If I can get the chart put up on, I'm not sure, is it up there now? It is. Great, thanks. I think that chart speaks volumes about the importance our government places on the role of municipal government. I'm just going to walk through that with you from the bottom to the top. The line you see at the bottom is the line for the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. It's 17%. That indicates what the Consumer Price Index has risen since we've had the privilege of forming government in 2007. The cost of living, if you will, has increased by 17%. The line on top of that is what we've spent on education. That's K-12 education. That's 30%. While the cost of living increased by 17%, we've increased funding K-12 education by 30%, far outstripping the cost of living. The next line up, you see, is post-secondary spending by the provincial government. We've increased it in the time we've been in government by 46%. The line above that, probably most near and dear to all of us, it's healthcare costs. It's money spent to the regional health authorities, has increased by 53%. All of those key priorities of government spending has far outstripped the cost of living, the Consumer Price Index. And the top line, if you look way up, the top line is municipal revenue sharing. It's increased by 108% since we formed government, while the cost of living has increased 17%. And I just want you all to know, you heard what the Premier said yesterday about honoring our commitment to municipal revenue sharing. As you know, there's a lag period, so about this time of the year, we always already know what the next year's revenue sharing numbers will be. And in times of economic difficulty, you heard what the Premier had said, revenue sharing will be increasing by $6.4 million. And that line that you see will increase from 108% to 113%. On infrastructure, we've already invested over $8 billion since 2007. That's more than double what was spent by the previous government in that same time period. We've worked with the federal government on a number of programs. The one you'd be most familiar with, of course, is the new Building Canada Fund. Interest in our first intake was intense. We had over 300 applications asking for $1.3 billion in projects. That's more projects than can be funded under this program. We announced 26 projects in July worth $34 million, and of course there'll be more projects announced in the coming weeks and months. We also all know there's been a recent change of government at the federal level, and when a new government takes office, we need to have some patience. There's always a transition period. And just like you, we're anxiously waiting for more information. But right now, we have more questions than answers. The new Minister of Infrastructure and Communities is Amarjeet Sohi from Edmonton. I've had a couple of phone conversations with him, and I'm looking forward to meeting with him in person very soon. Now, as the Premier also said yesterday, we'll continue to advocate for municipalities. We'll advocate for your priorities like sewer and water projects and roads. And when we receive details from the federal government rest assured the province will be there for you. You also heard the Premier say yesterday that we'll be ready with our share of the funding. Another front that we've been working on recently is annexation. As you know, most boundary alteration issues are settled amicably between municipalities. But every once in a while, there's one or two that end up at the Saskatchewan Municipal Board for resolution. The sticking point is usually the question of what financial compensation is paid by one municipality to another. The ministry has worked hard over the past year with both SUMA and SARM leadership around guidelines for annexation compensation. And in November, I had the opportunity to join with President Deb and President Reiter of SARM to make the announcement about the principles for financial settlements. Those principles were made possible thanks to the good work of our municipal leaders, and I want to personally thank President Deb, President Ray, the boards of directors of the two associations and their staff for all the good work you've done. Thank you very much. Now, when it comes to the area of municipal governance, as you all know, there's been significant changes to conflict of interest rules and standards. Those changes are based on the recommendation of Justice Barkley that came about because of his inquiry into the RM of Sherwood and the issue of land development. You all know that that led to the Reeve being removed from office. These changes were brought in so that conflicts of interest like this can be prevented. Potential conflicts of interest are faced by councillors in all types of municipalities all across the province. So amendments to all three municipal acts have been made to ensure consistency. This reassures the public that government has been proactive and responsive in strengthening municipal conflict of interest legislation. Now, as a former municipal administrator, I understand that these amendments involve sensitive issues and might be difficult for some, but this is the right thing to do. As you know, the new mandatory public disclosure statements require all mayors and councillors to identify their business financial interests. I just need to emphasize this. This change wasn't made simply for change's sake. This was made to comply with the recommendations of Justice Barkley. I've had some people voice concerns to me that they feel like somehow now municipal councillors are being held to a higher standard and have more detailed and onerous statements to do than MLAs. I can assure you that's just simply not the case. The requirements for MLAs are much more onerous, much more extensive. Public disclosure statement for MLAs includes things like listing your mutual funds and term deposits and organizations and associations you hold memberships in and gifts that you or family members might have received. None of those are requirements for councillors. And by the way, everyone should be aware that disclosure statements have already been mandatory for members of city councils. So we stand by the legislative changes, and we'll make every effort to work with municipalities to ensure full compliance. So I've been asked what we'll do if a councillor adamantly refuses to file the disclosure statement. As you know, the Act disqualifies a person from holding office if they don't file the statement and requires them to resign immediately if the statement isn't filed. If that's the case, any person could apply to a judge to have that seat declared vacant. Ratepayers could also file a complaint with the Ombudsman or could notify the ministry or the minister's office. So we're going to make every effort to help to ensure that everyone's in compliance. I think there's been a lot of misunderstandings on this issue, and I believe from comments I've heard back, I think the sessions on Sunday have been a big help. Right now, my ministry officials are working on a process to follow when it comes to our attention that a councillor possibly has not filed the statement. It'll likely involve a municipal advisor reaching out to that municipality to see if we can help, to see if there's an understanding, to see if we can assist that councillor to comply. But if they still refuse to comply, it's probably going to involve some form of warning letter or letters. Because as I said, we'll make every effort to help with compliance, but at the end of the day, we're going to ensure compliance. To do otherwise would be a complete disservice to all of you who do follow the law. The legislation allows for the removal of a councillor. We hope we never have to use that. On another matter, ministry officials have been meeting with members of SUMA and SARM in the New North. We'll be consulting over the next while on the possibility of some form of whistleblower protection around this. This idea was brought up last fall during the final stages of consultation on the conflict of interest legislation. And I believe it certainly has some merit. I think my officials think the same way. But it was raised sort of too late in the process, and it's too important to not do proper consultation on it. So we look forward to seeing where that consultation goes, and you could likely somewhere down the road see further legislation involving that. The province's ombudsman has obviously seen a change to her jurisdiction. Anyone can now submit an issue or complaint to the ombudsman regarding a municipality. She can investigate, but she also has well-established policies for screening out frivolous complaints, and it's a confidential process. The expansion of the Ombudsman's role to Saskatchewan's municipalities will assure the people of Saskatchewan of credible, independent, and an impartial office that they can take their concerns to, and they can know that their concerns will be taken seriously. In a different area of our ministry, on the public safety side, in 2014, we had major flood problems in some areas of the province. That was followed last year, as you know, by an unprecedented number of forest fires in the north. At the peak of that crisis, more than 125 fires were burning in the north. Over 13,000 people needed to be evacuated. Emergency shelters were set up in Saskatoon, Prince Albert, Regina, North Battleford, and even Cold Lake, Alberta. It was a huge effort. It involved all levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal. And a number of municipal firefighters from across the province volunteered to help. And for those of you here today that were involved in that, I say thank you. We held a special event at the legislature on November the 2nd to recognize and thank those who worked tirelessly to fight fire and also to provide support and shelter. We've now conducted a review of the response to last summer's wildfires, what we did right and what we could improve on. And officials are currently working on the results of that. You can expect to hear more about that in the very near future. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe this is the fourth opportunity that I've had to address this annual convention as your minister. There will be a provincial election in a couple of months, and I don't know what the future holds for me. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say something to all of you. For a Saskatchewan kid who spent his career in municipal work, to have the opportunity to serve as your minister has absolutely been the privilege of my career so far, and I say thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you very much.